Yes, finally, the holidays are truly over now. And I hear you think, what a depressing way to start a video, and why do you sound so relieved by the holidays being finally over? Normally, the holidays are truly a fun and joyful time. And yeah, that is, for some people, the case. For me, it's a bit of a difficult time. I mean, being socially awkward or wishing to be alone and doing my own thing is not in my username or anything. But it's true, while holidays are fun and all, it does take a toll on me, which in turn takes a toll on my hobby. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not like I can't play video games during the holidays, but when my social battery is constantly drained by it, my mental state eventually gets to a point where it's also not a proper state to be able to play focused a game, write a review, and edit it all completely into a video. This obviously left me in a little bit of a limbo state of trying out a lot of games but not being able to commit to one to review. And surprisingly, it required me to break a rule I set up for myself when it comes to reviewing games to get out of it. As you clicked on this video, you might already know, today I am going to review Shapez 2, a sequel to Shapez which I originally did cover but not officially reviewed. Ever since I played Shapez, it has been always a pleasure to mention it in a conversation, be that for its design ideas, execution, or its freaking amazing soundtrack. And while it's not the introduction to automation games, for me Shapez was the birthplace for my love of the genre. When a sequel was announced for it, you can imagine that I couldn't wait to play it, yet it took a while before I got to it. And it probably would have taken even longer if it wasn't for the holiday season. Not that long ago, I took with a lot of pain in my heart a folder from the Shapez 2 booth at Gamescom, knowing that I couldn't play it yet, because when it got released, it was released in early access. Reviewing or making content about early access games is fun and comes with some pros, but mostly cons in my opinion. The moment you write and upload something about it, the timer of the content's relevancy starts ticking. With luck, your content is valid for a couple of months, but it could easily be just a couple of weeks. And yet now I am taking the same risk again, but I just had to. The first Shapez game just struck a balance that I absolutely adored and usually gets me through rough times, like the holiday season. So I gambled on the hopes that Shapez 2 would do the same. Now, if that gamble paid off, that is what we're going to find out. So without further ado, this is my review of Shapez 2. Shapez 2 does not have an introduction, story, characters, or lore. All you get at the start is a single task: to create all kinds and combinations of shapes and deliver them to the vortex at the center of the map. To create all these shapes, you have to figure out and develop automated factories able to cut, turn, and reform shapes to the required format and optimize logistics from sources to factories and from factories to the vortex itself. And that is it. On paper, a very simplistic idea and goal, but that is where we immediately find Shapez 2's strength in my opinion. While it's great to have large goals and premises when it comes to factory builders and automation games, like Factorio, Satisfactory, or my personal favorite, Dyson Sphere, it's the laid-back attitude to what you create and how it's presented in Shapez 2 that really hooks me. It's especially strong at rewarding you with the same satisfying feeling you get with others and before mentioned similar games, yet with a different pace, attitude, and energy. Shapez 2 is played at your own pace and leisure. There's nothing forcing you to hurry up, no immediate threat to be considered or timers to comply with. There's no death, no end, no game over. Of course, the game does give you tasks and goals to work towards. These tasks are there to help you understand the game's core aspects and mechanics, slowly introducing you to more complicated shapes and depths of what the game is capable of. But again, it's up to you at what pace you learn them and decide when you are comfortable to move forward. The most important tasks are these milestones. They lead to technology unlocks and permanent shape tasks, which at endgame you will strive for to complete. However, if you want to make other shapes, that's perfectly fine as well. Nobody is forcing you to complete all milestones, and honestly, I am very guilty of ignoring them a lot throughout my entire playthrough. Instead, I love to tinker with ideas of how to improve my created factories, most of the times for tasks that are not essential in the slightest. Just streamlining a production here and there and making it easier to implement them across the board. Not because it was a requirement for progression or efficiency or something like that. It was because I felt like doing so, and what I did to improve or streamline my factories could be heavily debated as not being improvements at all. In fact, it might be for some veterans of this genre absolute heresy, but Shapez doesn't care for efficiency. Yet another strength of this game, in my opinion. It only doesn't matter if it's the best, it matters that you created it and that it works at any capacity. I mentioned in my Shape Hero Factory review that I love these kind of games, but I wish I was better at them. Don't get me wrong, I don't suck at them, but I'm not great at them either. My success in these games depend heavily on the level of forgiving that they are. And Shapez leans a lot towards being very forgiving for not being perfect in efficiency or your designs. And personally, I might even be the wrong person for these kind of games in general when I think about it. Because I, for one, don't care how efficient my factories are. For me, it's more important how my factories look and how I see the resources move around and the machines doing their thing through motions. Seeing my factories breathe, so to say, is just so much nicer and rewarding to see. And in case of Shapez, seeing shapes form the way I planned out and arrive at destination as planned is just much more enjoyable than focusing on max output or using every bit of space as efficient as possible. Now, when I felt like it and wanted to, I did do min-maxing here and there as well, because I still like doing that from time to time. But I'm just happy it's not a must for the player to enjoy this factory builder. Progression will always be made with your designs no matter what you do. And that is the main reason why I love Shapez and I can lose myself in the game a little bit too much at times. Funny enough, I said something similar about the first Shapez game. There, it's also not important how efficient you are. As long as you made a factory that manages to create the required shape, everything is good and fine. But that's also where a lot of the similarities ends, as while Shapez is a sequel, it feels like a completely different beast altogether. If you put these two games side by side, all that is similar is the genre the games are in and the idea of creating shapes out of other shapes. The biggest change is obviously the art style itself. In Shapez, the art style made a complete 180. We went from a 2D draw gray and white with a little bit of color here and there to a more sci-fi 3D art style, which at first glance really rubbed me the wrong way. I liked the drawn feeling of the first game quite a lot, and it gave a character to a game that, when you consider that visuals is one of the larger aspects in these kind of games because there's no story, character or lore, it's important to have something that really stands out and feels unique to your game. Eventually the 3D art style did grow on me quite a bit. Even though it doesn't have as much character as the first game, it still does have some character. Especially the atmosphere of being in space and a particular orange tint that keeps returning in every building, belt, sign and platform really created an art style I would associate with Shapez. An aspect that does stand out and feels unique to Shapez and is on par with the previous game is its soundtrack. Man, did it feel great to dive back into Shapez and hear the amazing soundtrack. Not only are the new tracks absolute bangers, but I opted for the supporter edition, which also gives you access to the older tracks in the game as well. Which sounds very cool and is kinda bad, as it shouldn't have been part of some edition, but just be included in the game by default. Nor should the soundtrack be exclusively locked behind the edition, as you can't separately buy it. If I wasn't a fan of the original Shapez, I would have totally missed out on the entire soundtrack combination, which again would be a shame because the soundtrack is just so good. Now we're coming to the tricky part of the review. Warning a player what is to come or critique certain aspects, ideas and design choices are somewhat temporarily with these kind of games. Though considering what they share about their future updates and aims for the full release, I'm willing to take the risk, because there are some wonky things and strange choices I suspect they are not going to change that soon. First up, the controls themselves are fine, and thanks to the simplicity of the game itself, there's not a lot of menu browsing or constant switching between things to find an item or certain building. The building blocks given at the beginning of the game are, besides a couple of additions, all that you need for the entire playthrough. However, as you progress in the game, a second build mode is introduced and the importance of layering takes a bigger role. And that is where the game loses itself a bit. There are basically two build modes here. One is on top of the tiles in space. This one involves the actual factory construction and is what you will be doing for most of the early game. And the other one involves mining and logistics and the tiles themselves you want to build factories on. Switching to this one and back to the factory building mode happens automatically when scrolling in and out of tiles. This works fine until you decide to use a layering system for your factory. There have been many moments where I thought I was zoomed in enough that the automatic switch between build modes should have happened, yet it didn't because I was at a lower layer in the overall space. Of course, vice versa happened as well, where I was using shortcuts to build my factory only to be slinged out of that build mode to another one as I zoomed out too far to oversee my entire factory for a short moment. Now, it's not game breaking, but when it happens a couple of times in a row, it does get annoying. I was completely locked in and concentrating heavily in what I was doing, only to lose my line of thought because of a wrong camera position, or a layer selection made me refuse or switch to a certain build mode. This critique might sound a little bit picky, but Shapez 2's strength comes from the nice balance of puzzle/problem solving thinking and the relaxing flow that comes from that. And it getting disrupted like that once in a while makes a huge impact and honestly is one of the reasons why I eventually stopped playing. Other reasons were of course that some things just come to an end, which is fine. I mean, I also gotta go back to other games, projects and even life itself. But there was one main reason that made me stop playing Shapez 2 and it made me a little bit sad, to be honest. While it is a natural trend in automation/factory builders that you will reach a stage where you create blueprints of your factories that you can plop down easily, speeding up the process and allowing you to focus on other tasks, it's still not a natural trend that I like of the genre. As for Shapez 2, it means the game changes from a factory builder to a transport manager, with occasionally factory building spread in between. Now, I love some open transport tycoon from time to time, but that's not what I'm looking for here. Not only because I'd rather spend hours on building a factory that creates a star shape, but the systems available to you, as of making of this video, to make these train networks feels very early in development. Making a train line from one station to another might look like an easy task, yet in my opinion, it always took much longer than needed. There's just so much to keep in mind when connecting to stations. Like, did I place the correct station down, or did I swap between unload or a load station, because I constantly have to flip, rotate and swap between the station types, because the one direction track in the station is predetermined. Is the track pointing the correct way on both ends, so when I connect the tracks over a longer distance it will work right away instead of having to rotate and flip the stations around or having to redo the entire track all over again because it was pointing the wrong direction. And if you decide to put multiple trains on a single network, then the annoyance of dividing different train lines begins. Instead of having a system where the train route is assigned to a station, meaning the trains will always try to get back to it in the shortest route, in Shapez 2 we have a color code system where you can assign a handful of colors to the trains. These colors then determine if a train must take a certain route or move forward. Which sounds not that bad, but if you get far enough in the game, you will get to a point that your train network is super large, and 7 colors to divide a lot of trains won't really cut it for you anymore, as it basically means you can only add 7 resources to a single network before having to create another one. Now yes, there's a lot of space to make multiple different networks, but honestly, being forced to do this feels so counterproductive compared to how the rest of the game works. Everywhere else, it's a choice to do what you want. No matter what you decide, it will result in some form of success. But then the train system feels directly opposite to that. If you don't use the exact way it's meant to be used, it will come and bite you later down the line. And it seriously has made me consider doing everything just with belts instead. Not only to avoid the train system, but also because when I reached this logistic era in my playthrough, I started to feel disconnected from my factories. As I mentioned before, it's a natural trend in games like this that things get streamlined and that the focus goes to other things. Yet that also meant I started to see less and less of the thing I actually like about these kind of games. Seeing my factories alive, doing what I plan, and ultimately see from start to finish my shapes arrive at the vortex. All of that becomes more distant the more you automate things. Even donating to the vortex, which in my opinion is the coolest thing to look at the end of the day when you add another shape to the production pile. Instead, all the belts disappear and you throw everything in large numbers into the vortex via train. And that looks just a lot less satisfying. But yeah, the point where things become too automated in an automation/factory builder for my taste, so to say, was 80 hours into it, so I ain't really complaining about it. I know I will come back to my factories and continue what I build up, because in the end, Shapez 2 is great. It's not per se better or more than the original. I would actually argue to say that it's a different interpretation of the same formula. The two games are too different from one another, and that's actually fine. More than fine either, because now I have two games lurking in the shadows, ready to devour huge amount of hours instead of one. But all jokes aside, Shapez 2 is great. A lovely game with a premise that is as simple as its execution. For the most part. There are here and there some bumps in the road, but that is not enough to affect your experience in a very bad way. The only problem maybe is that the game does not have an end game or an end goal, and that can feel anticlimactic. All in all, I would highly recommend checking out Shapez 2. It's relaxing, building exploration at your own pace, and not being efficient is not punished harshly. It's more important that you just enjoy the puzzle experience that comes with automation/factory build. So for veterans of the genre, this game might not be as a challenge or interesting, but for everyone else who wants to dabble in this genre, it sure is.